There are a few rules drilled into every climber who attempts Mount Everest. Leave ample time for your descent, listen to your guide. If things go bad, you will have to save yourself, and if you die up there, that's where you'll stay.
8,850 meters. We are the highest people in the world.
By the time climbers reach Everest's death zone, they're both physically and mentally messed up. The danger is very real at 26,247 feet. There's not enough oxygen to survive for more than a few hours. Climbers' breathing becomes shallow, almost an act of will, and without oxygen, the brain can begin to swell, and one's thinking can be altered. But mistakes are deadly, and the longer someone stays in the death zone, the more inevitable mistakes become. The law on Everest is keep moving or die.
If something goes wrong, there's nothing you can do.
You know how flight attendants warn you that if the oxygen should fail on a plane, you need to put your own mask on first so you can then help others? High up on Everest, that's only half true. Each climber is responsible for themselves, and everyone who starts up is made painfully aware of the fact that they may not return.
When we go into the death zone, we know we are, in a sense, dying, meaning our body tissue is being used for energy to keep us alive.
But what if a fellow climber is incapacitated? It's a terrible dilemma. They won't survive without assistance, but helping them puts one's own life in danger. Even with supplemental oxygen, there's not enough up there to share. And anyone who exerts himself to help someone else taxes their own system, perhaps fatally. But do you keep going, reach the summit, and hopefully live to brag about it, leaving someone behind to die? Everest climbers are faced with this choice every year. Help yourself and survive, or help others and maybe die along with them. Leaving someone behind may look callous, but it's often the only option.
And people can just decide that they don't want to move and just sit down and that's it.
If you die on Mount Everest, your body will likely remain there. It's extremely risky and expensive, costing upwards of $100,000 to try to recover remains from the mountain. To date, some 200-plus bodies are somewhere on the mountain, where the cold preserves them indefinitely. Everest attempts have about a 1 in 100 death rate, depending on the conditions in a particular year. Some bodies can be recognized by their features and gear, while others have never been conclusively identified. The corpses and their distinctive colorful climbing gear can remain visible for years, a sobering reminder of the dangers to climbers making their ascent.
Climbers on Everest can experience something called summit fever. They just want to get to the top, not considering whether they'll have enough energy to get back down.
The most famous body on Mount Everest is called Green Boots. He's never been identified, but most believe he was a climber named Swang Paljor. Green Boots got his nickname from the brightly colored pair of hiking boots he was wearing. Climbers had to step over them on their way to the summit. For a long time, Green Boots served as an elevation marker, telling climbers how much further they had to the summit. But in 2014, someone moved Green Boots. No one knows who did it or why. Green Boots, if he is indeed Swang Paljor, may have succumbed to summit fever, the determination to get what one paid and trained so hard for, that iconic photograph at the top of the world. Paljor pressed on to the summit despite being warned against it by a guide that bad weather was coming in. Paljor and his companion made it to the top, but a blizzard rolled in during their descent, and they never made it back to camp. The most controversial death on Mount Everest was that of British mountaineer David Sharp. Sharp froze to death while as many as 40 climbers passed by without stopping to help. The public reacted to Sharp's death with outrage, although many climbers defended the actions of those on the mountain that day. Incapacitated climbers in the death zone basically can't be rescued, and Sharp was already near death from severe frostbite. One of the climbers who received the brunt of the criticism was double amputee Mark Ingalls, who was himself suffering from severe frostbite and had to be partially carried down the mountain by his Sherpas. But still, the public was enraged that he hadn't stopped to help.
The hardest thing is to think that people think that you would walk past a dying person and not help them if you could.
Sharp was climbing Everest solo with insufficient oxygen, no Sherpas, and no radio. That didn't make him any less worthy of help, but it does explain why he was dying alone. Still, Sharp's death is seen by many as one of Everest's most shameful moments. Sergei Arsentiev wanted to be the first woman to summit Everest without supplemental oxygen. She achieved her goal, but on the way down, her condition deteriorated rapidly. At some point during the descent, she got separated from her husband, Sergei, who assumed she'd gone on ahead of him. But when he got to camp, Francis wasn't there. He immediately went back up the mountain with medicine and oxygen. It's unlikely he ever found her. Francis was just 4 hours from the summit when 2 climbers found her near death. They stopped to help, giving up their own bid for the peak, but they couldn't save her. Sergei's body was found a year later. It looked like he'd fallen while trying to rescue her. Most people who die on Everest aren't being deliberately reckless. Then there was Marco Siffredi, who died snowboarding down the mountain. He'd done it once before, but not on this particular piece of the mountain. There hadn't been enough snow there at the time, so he came back the next year, summited a second time, then strapped on his board and started down. He was never seen or heard from again. Later that day, Sherpas claimed to have seen a man snowboarding down the mountain, but when they investigated, they couldn't find any tracks. There was a lot of fresh powder the day Safredi disappeared, so the prevailing theory is that an avalanche killed him. His body was never recovered. People at high altitudes risk developing high-altitude cerebral edema, or HAZE, which can cause fatigue, confusion, and lack of coordination. Scientists don't know exactly what causes HAZE, but the latest thinking is that it's either high blood pressure within the skull or cellular damage from low oxygen levels, and there's a greater risk among young men, but not for physiological reasons. They're more likely to keep climbing despite warning signs.
I don't have to go to the summit. I've been there. I will try to push you up as high as possible, but I want to get us killed.
At first, HAZE can look like run-of-the-mill exhaustion, low blood sugar, or dehydration, but as it progresses, it looks more like mental illness.
And people make big decisions that are wrong. Like people will come down a ridge and they're supposed to go to the left and they'll go to the right.
Patients become disoriented, have trouble speaking, and may struggle to remain awake. Early recognition is critical. HAZE can lead to permanent brain damage, coma, and/or death within 24 hours. As for treatment, the best option is to make a cautious but rapid descent, preferably to under 1,000 meters above sea level. Hannelore Schmatz was the fourth recorded woman to summit Everest. She was also the first woman to die up there. In 1979, Schmatz and her husband Gerhard, both experienced mountaineers who'd summited challenging Himalayan peaks before, decided to tackle Everest. On summit day, they were in separate groups. Gerhard summited without complications, but seeing that conditions were poor, radioed Hannelore to warn her. Hannelore was reportedly annoyed at the suggestion she cancel her summit attempt and forged ahead. She made it to the top, but on the way down, she was exhausted and made the deadly decision to spend the night at altitude before continuing her descent. The next day, she asked her guide for water, then died where she sat. Her body remained seated on the mountain, her face worn away by icy winds. 5 years later, a Nepalese guide and a policeman fell to their deaths in an attempt to recover her body. Eventually, her remains disappeared over the edge. Having successfully summited Everest and returned safely once doesn't guarantee one's future safety. Take the case of Sherpa Babu Chiri. Babu Chiri was by all accounts an incredible mountaineer. By the age of 35, Chiri had summited Everest 10 times, accomplishing some near superhuman feats like reaching the summit from base camp in under 17 hours, surviving a night at the peak, and summiting twice in 1 month. He was planning a truly bonkers feat of athleticism, going over the top from the Tibet side to the Nepal side, then turning around and reversing his route, when he died on what was for him a routine climb, falling into a crevasse while trying to take a picture. He left behind a wife and 6 children, and the King of Nepal personally acknowledged Chiri's loss as affecting the whole nation. Like quicksand, invisible ink, and secret passageways, avalanches are something most Westerners rarely have to think about. But on the snowy slopes of the Himalayas, avalanches pose a distinct threat, with the sudden slides of snow and ice sweeping away any climbers unlucky enough to be in their path.
Stuff is gonna come down. It happens every day, and you just don't want to be at the wrong place at the wrong time.
On Everest, though, there's also a distinct phenomenon called a serac, in which chunks of glacier break off and fall down the mountain, sometimes falling again on subsequent days as the sun partially melts them.
We all realize the risks involved, and you accept those risks, or you don't play the game.
Conditions on Everest vary significantly from year to year, including the level of avalanche risk. In general terms, heavy snow and high winds are the danger signs, as these can deposit snow on steep or unstable surfaces from which a mass is more likely to slide as a unit, overload previously stable snowpacks below, and turn individual snowflakes into fused ice crystals. The 2014 and especially 2015 climbing seasons were particularly bad years for avalanches on Everest. 16 guides died in a single event in 2014 that closed the mountain for the rest of the season. The 2015 avalanches were triggered by a strong earthquake in April that battered Nepal. 22 people died at base camp, and the mountain was again closed after a strong aftershock in May. The area around Everest Base Camp is staffed with hardworking, well-trained medical professionals who provide the best care possible under the circumstances. But the cold altitude, remote location, and treacherous terrain create intense conditions, and care in the field has many challenges. For instance, supplies are brought in on yaks, so if something goes wrong with the yak, you might not get what you need. Helicopters can provide support in emergencies, weather permitting, but the weather is often terrible. Limited running water means that even hygiene has to be carefully and considerately undertaken. Then there's the fact that the buildings themselves are sitting on slowly shifting glaciers. In many cases, injured or sick people have to be sent to better equipped facilities at lower altitudes after their initial diagnosis and stabilization. One benefit of the influx of outside tourists into the high Himalayas is that the medical professionals who come to treat them also treat the support staff and local population, who, because of the area's remoteness and Nepal's relative poverty, may otherwise struggle to access medical care. With both timing and maneuvering ability critical for survival on Everest, a blizzard represents a threat just as severe as falls and low oxygen. Reduced visibility and dangerous winds can stall a climber's progress even as falling and blowing snow lowers their temperatures and makes the paths up and down the mountain far more treacherous. The truth is that if a blizzard pins explorers down in one spot for too long, it can be fatal.
We have mass casualties.
The most famous blizzard to hit Everest during a recent-ish climbing season was in 1996, recounted in John Krakauer's disaster-lit classic Into Thin Air. Krakauer was on the mountain that year but got lucky. He avoided the worst of the conditions and summited shortly before the disaster struck. Adventure tourism had drawn more people than ever to Everest, and the Nepalese government had increased the number of available permits, resulting in overextended guides, too many inexperienced climbers, and crowding on the mountain that slowed down some teams as they waited behind other groups.
I was so excited about Everest that I went home and I Googled how to climb Everest.
When a blizzard walloped the mountain and those on it the night of May 10th, it hit the underprepared and straggling groups on the mountain hard. Some climbers were trapped near the summit. Others who were in the act of descending couldn't find their way forward to the nearest camp. 8 people died, mostly of hypothermia, but with at least one simply disappearing on the mountain. And some survivors required amputations due to frostbite. It was the deadliest recorded day on Everest at the time, surpassed eventually by events in 2014.
Mount Everest is more than 29,000 feet tall, which might make you think most victims of the mountain die by falling, but that's only the second most common cause of death. According to the BBC, most people who die on Everest are killed in avalanches. The third most common cause of death on the mountain is exposure or frostbite, which accounts for around 11% of fatalities. Other causes of death include falling ice, rope accidents, pneumonia, or even drowning. Mount Everest is one of the most remote places on Earth. It takes 10 days just to get to base camp in Nepal, 6 weeks to acclimatize, and another 9 days to climb to the top. And that's assuming conditions are ideal. It's also expensive. The low-end figure for an Everest expedition is about $30,000, with an average cost of around $65,000. And yet one of the things that's been killing people on Mount Everest is something most of us wouldn't expect: traffic. In a strange and unexpected development, modern Everest has become something of a tourist trap. On the perfect climbing day, you might encounter hundreds of other climbers, all trying to reach the exact same spot. If you wait too long in line at Mount Everest, you might run out of oxygen and die. You can climb Everest from 2 different base camps, one in Nepal and the other in Tibet. The governments behind both camps used to be pretty selective about who got to go up the mountain. Up until 1985, Nepal tended to allow only one expedition on each route at a time. But Nepal is not a wealthy nation, and in total, the climbing industry is worth about $300 million a year. The Nepalese government issued a record number of 381 permits in 2019 and announced no intention of scaling back, despite seeing the highest death toll since 2015.
Ang Dorji Sherpa, who summited Everest 20 times, says he's never seen the mountain so packed.
Do you think things need to change? Yes.
There are also no official physical requirements for climbing permits, and some of the adventure outfits operating in Nepal are less than strict about who they'll take to the summit. That means more inexperienced climbers on the mountain, which means more danger for everyone. You might imagine the best time to visit Everest would be high summer, when you don't have to worry about blizzards and freezing temperatures. But you can only really climb Everest during the month of May, in a very short window of time between the winter storm season and the summer monsoon season. But hey, that's at least balmy spring, right? Nope. At base camp, daytime temperatures max out at around 59 degrees Fahrenheit, and at night they drop to freezing. That temperature drops roughly 2.7 degrees for every 490 feet of elevation, and the summit is 11,429 feet above base camp. On the flip side, some parts of Everest can be hot in May, up to 90 degrees, especially broad, snowy expanses that reflect the sun. So even in ideal conditions, the weather is going to be bad. And just because you book your ascent during that narrow window doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be safe. In recent years, there has been a rash of so-called blue sky deaths because everyone wants to climb Everest when the sky is blue, and in the 2019 season, the weather window was especially narrow. On May 22, 2019, climbers set a record for the most humans to reach the summit in a single day, with a total of more than 200. No matter how fit you are, once you reach a certain elevation, your body starts to literally die, and you still have more than 4,000 feet to go. At that point, you're racing against your own mortality. That last 4,000 feet is called the death zone, because there's not enough air there for the human body to continue functioning. Outside magazine editor Grayson Schaefer described the death zone to NPR, saying, "Once you get to about 25,000 feet, your body just can't metabolize the oxygen. Your muscles start to break down. You start to have fluid that builds up around your lungs and your brain. Your brain starts to swell. You start to lose cognition."
When you are at that altitude, every breath you take in only contains about a third of the oxygen that it would if you were at, say, sea level.
In the death zone, climbers can suffer from heart attack, stroke, and altitude sickness. Fluid can accumulate in the lungs, leading to altitude pulmonary edema, which causes a cough that's sometimes so severe it can crack a rib. The low oxygen can also lead to transient blindness or hemorrhage in the blood vessels of the eyes. And the whole experience is so physically taxing that one study found Everest climbers typically lose between 10 and 20 pounds.